Do not buy these comic books yet. Is there going to be an opportunity to catch these books as they overcorrect? We're going to talk about some key comics that just came into the spotlight recently, up next on this video from Bronzeville Comics. Hello, panelologists. This is Jim from Bronzeville Comics coming to you with another video. Before we get started, please like, comment, subscribe. Follow us on Instagram at Bronzeville_comics, on Whatnot at Bronzeville_comics. There is a link in the description of this video. If you're not yet signed on to Whatnot, you can use it and get $10 off your first purchase. That purchase does not have to be from me. I do sales every Monday night at 10 p.m. Eastern Time. Also in the description of this video is a link to my eBay store as well as my email. So the other night, I saw the Madam Web movie, and I wasn't particularly impressed. There were some really, really horrible aspects to it. The story wasn't terrible. The performances weren't great. The special effects were lacking. And there seemed to be an overall lack of coherence in terms of developing the property. Tahar Rahim should get the Golden Raspberry for Worst Supporting Actor next year. He was absolutely terrible. And I'm not sure if it was him or somebody else that actually later dubbed in the lines of that character. But it was, suffice it to say, it's not an astounding success. And people in the comic book market, speculators going to speculate, to quote Swaggelhouse, is people have been looking forward to this movie, been speculating about the characters are going to be in it, excited about some of the characters. I was glad that when I walked into the film, I already knew that we weren't really going to see superheroes. We weren't going to see Mattie Franklin or Arana or Julia Carpenter as really, other than very briefly in a premonition, spoiler warning, as superheroes. So the excitement that builds up, the anticipation of seeing character go from comic book page to screen was rather muted. And even for Madam Web herself, she was not the character that we've grown accustomed to, at least the original character in the comic books. But what I want to do is I just want to dive into some of the comic book values. The movie's been out for about a week and a half right now, and see where those comic book values have gone and when is the time to buy them. So let's jump into the computer and take a quick look. So I'm going to use Go Collect as my go-to, and we're going to start with Amazing Spider-Man 210, the first appearance of Madam Web. I said that maybe that Tippi Hedren would have been a better choice for Madam Web than Dakota Johnson. Tippi Hedren, who starred in Hitchcock's The Birds, is Dakota Johnson's maternal grandmother. So let's take a look at the 9.6, just because it's a lot more common than the 9.8. And we're looking at a book from 1980. So let's take a look at the prices of the 9.6. And we can see here that we had a spike. Now let's follow the timeline. It was right around the end of 2019 that there started to be rumors that we were going to get a movie, and you could see the book was jumping upwards to $250. Now, if we go back to early 2019, there was still like a $250 sale in December of 2018. This is all pre-boom, pre-pandemic, but it's $100 plus book, right? Somewhere I would say in the $100 to $150 range for a 9.6. We'll take a look at the 9.8 also, because I think that does have an extra aspect to it, and that it's a 9.8. But 9.6 is a nice high grade book. But now we see the combination of the movie speculation and the comic book boom. This book is jumping up to 480, took a little dip, and then it had a record high of $752.50 for a 9.6. That's in February 22. Now, the book has come down ever since. And then we saw, when did we see the trailer? November of 2023. And there was a little bit of a resurgence with the book. It went from like low 200s up to high 200s. But interestingly, right? Let's take a look. These are the recent sales, right? Fixed price, $350, $340, $250, $272. The most recent sale, and this comes a week after the movie came out, $400. So somebody did jump on this book. Let's take a look at the 9.8, which is obviously the only 6% of the census are 9.8s. And we see a very similar pattern kind of associated with the comic boom, right? We jump up to 1,700, down to 1,100, and then, 1,800, and it's kind of bouncing around, but with an overall trend over the last really 2 years of the price going down. Now, let's look at what's happened very recently and a lot of sales, right? So the book at the beginning of the year is selling for about $700, right? And that's kind of what we're seeing. I mean, did the November trailer spike this over 1,000? Maybe, there's still people who are like, get that trailer excitement. It jumped from like 800 to 1,000. And then it settled back down at about $700, let's say. $750, somewhere in that range. An auction for $750, an auction for $710, and then a $1,000 sale, another auction for $700, then a couple of best offer accepts, auction for $700. So I would say that this book is kind of settling in at around $700. Now, the question is, where is this book? Where does this book belong? Because I think we have to ignore two factors, both the comic boom and the anticipation of the movie, because I'd be a little bit surprised if we're going to see much more development of this character or these characters in general in the movies. So I think we have to look back at where the book was prior, right? I mean, we do have a couple of $700 sales in 2018, then down the end of the year to 270, right? And maybe there were some rumors as Morbius was getting prepared. So I'm going to kind of go back here. I think $800 is a lot for this book. I mean, this book was kind of hovering in the 200 some odd dollar range. Where does this belong? We're going to see an overall trend. If we kind of follow the trend line, where should it be? Maybe $400. So I think this book still has some correction to do. And it's going to be interesting to follow. These kinds of books in general tend to overcorrect when there's a lot of vitriol about the property, about the movie, which I think is a little bit of what we're seeing here. A little bit. But it's still maintaining its $700 price. I would wait on this. I think it has room to come down. I'm actually kind of surprised by these high sales. The question is, where's the floor? I don't think we've gotten there yet. I think there are plenty of, there aren't a lot of 9.8s. There are 217 9.8s. There's also a newsstand, but they don't really track the newsstands on CGC. There'll be no census for it. The newsstand goes for more. It's 1980. It shouldn't really, but we'll look at something 2 days before the trailer, $1,700. So like $1,000 more for a newsstand. This is 1980. There were more newsstands out there than direct markets, but again, the newsstands probably were a little more beat up in general. The direct editions were taken care of. Let's look at the other main characters in the film, and I think these are all newer characters. There are a plethora of Spider characters, and it sort of brings into question the long-term possibility of seeing these characters developed on screen. This might be a one and done for these characters. So, Arana, Amazing Fantasy number 15. This is from, what year is this from? It says unknown age. It is not an unknown age. Come on, guys. I think we can see it here. This is like, what? That's bothering me now. Let's go to another source. No, number one, Amazing Fantasy 15 probably should hold its value over the long term. 2004. Okay, so let's take a look. First appearance of Arana, pretty cool character. The 9.8. That's really what is going to be the great. Half of the books are 9.8s. We see here, and this had to have been a combination of boom and speculation the character is going to be in the movie. $462. Not going to see that for decades. But we see here is this book was selling fixed prices 150, auctions 75, 90. Auction 67, 68, 86, 83, 97. So that was a pretty strong auction of $97. So it's dipped below $100. The question is, where was it previously? It is a first appearance. I mean, back in 2017, it was going for case cost. And then it was bouncing up around $200 or so. I think at this point, this might have overcorrected. These sales in the $60 might have already overcorrected. This is a character that's popular in the books. I don't think we're going to see much of her in the movies anymore. Now let's go to another book, and this has a complicating factor for it as well, and that is Marvel Superhero Secret Wars number 7, the first appearance of Julia Carpenter, portrayed by the popular actress Sydney Sweeney. This is a Secret Wars book, right? And that is a popular miniseries. There are plenty of them out there. If we look at the census, there are 2,700 on the census, 30% of them, 829, 9.8. So a ton more, right? What it was, no more 9.8s with the Amazing Fantasy. About the same number of 9.8s. But people will collect this entire series. And there are certain series collectors who would, want to have this entire series in a 9.8. There are going to be, a couple hundred of those at least, right? That's going to be part of who is getting this book. So even though there's the same number of 9.8s approximately as Amazing Fantasy 1, this is going to be Secret Wars collectors that are going to want this book. So that kind of is going to elevate it as well. Plus, it's a book from the 80s, not the 2000s. And we can see, let's take a look at the historical trend, right? Under $100. Under $100 forever. And then all of a sudden, it jumps up in 2018 to 235. And then it corrects back down to just over 100, around 100. And then it jumps up during the boom up to 384. That's, I guess, its best. It's still at $220 for the most recent auction. This is harder to, separate because this is not just the first appearance of Julia Carpenter. I had to laugh. I think it was one of the YouTube videos I was watching when this book made the Hot 10. No, when Secret Wars 8 made a Hot 10, they're like, a second appearance of Julia Carpenter. Nobody's buying Secret Wars 8 for the second appearance of Julia Carpenter. But there are people that are buying this because it's part of the series, right? So I think that has something to do with it. We saw kind of this correction down here into the mid 100s and then a jump up again November when the trailer came out and we did see Sydney Sweeney in costume. I think this has room to fall. I don't think we're anywhere near the floor on this book. But again, that's just me. Don't take financial. I'm not a financial advisor. Do your own research and make your own decisions. If you want the book, you want the book. Okay, let's look at the other character, Mattie Franklin, whose first appearance is in Amazing Spider-Man Volume 2, number 5 from 1999 by John Byrne. So this is when Byrne reset. It's a different character than we see in the film pretty much. And she's the third Spider-Woman. And look here, this book, just under $100. And then in 2021, even through the boom, it doesn't move. It doesn't move through the boom. And then all of a sudden, bam, up to $575 in May. That's still during the boom. It becomes a $500 book. And then bam, right back down. And now we're at, 80-ish dollars, right? $50 for an auction recently. I think this book is kind of corrected appropriately. I think it's probably about an $80 book in a 9.8 right now. Let's take a look at the census. 209, almost half of them, 100 are 9.8s. I thought this was one of the better characters in the film. And, but also this book is fairly plentiful, right? This was the reboot in 99. I mean, Marvel was struggling and their print run was down, but they got John Byrne to do it. And there are very few keys in this particular volume of Amazing Spider-Man. But just look at this. That's the past. This is the present. I think the future is pretty much in line with that, like under $100. I mean, this, didn't go anywhere for a long time. And I also imagine if we could see historical CGC submissions that this is probably a supply and demand thing. Probably in the last year and 5 months, there have been a lot more of these books submitted, a lot more 9.8s. And then let's look at the antagonist, Ezekiel Sims, his first appearance here in Amazing Spider-Man number 30 from 2001. So a little bit later in the same volume 2. And we can kind of see the same thing. Where is this hanging out? It's hanging out. It's also the first appearance of Moreland, under $100. And then it's helped by the boom because it's a double first appearance. And I think a lot of people jumped on that to over a $300 book. And now it's corrected. Right. And we got a little bit of a spike when we saw the trailer in November. And then it's dropped back down. And it's now trending. I think it's still correcting. Again, I don't think this is a $100 book necessarily. I mean, look at this. This is weird. 1,500 on the census, 861 9.8s. Compare that to the same run, right? Just 25 issues earlier, 2 years earlier, only 209, 100 on the census, right? There are, 8 times as many books on the census for number 30. And that's, I think, a large part because it is a double first appearance. I thought the character we're not going to see the character again. I thought the performance was terrible. Let me know in the comments if you thought differently. So, yeah, I want to compare it to another book, right? Or another character, which is kind of a similar storyline, similar track record. That's Morbius. Morbius is another fact, but let's take a look at, his trajectory. Early 2019, like this is a book, 2017, $200, $300. Okay. Then it jumps up to 500, right? As we get rumors that there's going to be a movie, and then the comic boom comes upon us and it is a $1,000 book, right? And now we've had this correction. We've had this long, slow downward correction, pretty much following the market down to about $300. Where was it in 2018? At about $300. So I think it's more or less where it should be. We see some fluctuation, auctions versus fixed price. Somebody paid $450 for it. I did the most common grade, which is a 7.0. This is very early Bronze Age, right? It's October 1971. It is a 15-cent Amazing Spider-Man. I think it was the last 15-center. And here's where, and I think Madam Web, her first appearance, Amazing Spider-Man 210, is going to hold that too. There are people that collect the Amazing Spider-Man run, or at least parts of the run. Some people want 1 to 100. Some people want 100 to 200. Some people want 200 to the end, whatever it is. There are always people that are going to collect that run. So just by the fact that a character's first appearance is in Amazing Spider-Man, as opposed to, let's say, Thor or Captain America or Avengers, there's going to be more of a demand for the book. And I think that's what we see here with Morbius. But we've seen this correction, right? And it is, right, boom, movie. When did the movie come out? The movie came out in April of 2022. Look what happens. Bam, it goes from $1,200 down to $800. Morbius, this book didn't even wait for the comic boom to end to just start free falling in price. And then another book, a more modern key, is Morbius The Living Vampire #1, his first ongoing solo series. He, of course, was in Fear and had a solo series in that. But look, I mean, this was all over the place. It, I mean, it is a $50 to $70, $80 book. And then, boom, it jumps up to $187, and it's kind of dancing around that. And then we get the boom, and it climbs all the way up to $188, so just shy of $200. And then the movie comes out, and it goes boom. It tracks way down. Now, what we are seeing here, look, we are seeing a little bit of an uptick, from $40 to $70. I mean, look at this. I mean, 39, 40, 19, 39, 43, 32. This is a book that nobody wanted. And we look at the census, 1,400 on the census, 709/8. And I think that's supply and demand. Not a lot of people were submitting this book until the movie was announced. Couple that with the comic boom. And then, now remember, the comic boom also, because CGC was so backed up, the supply of graded books was delayed. And then we got a flood of them. Like in late 2022 is when books started coming back from CGC en masse after like holdups sometimes of over a year for some submissions. So, yeah, when the movie does not do well, sometimes, especially when there is plenty of supply, the demand disappears and the prices fall. Simple economics. A little bit of a difference with 3 of these books. When we talk about Morbius, Amazing Spider-Man 101, there's still going to be a demand because people want this as part of the ASM run. And it is a cool first Spider-Man villain appearance. He's still a character that people in the comic book sphere want, even if the movie didn't do well. Then Julia Carpenter's appearance in Secret Wars. There are a ton of collectors that want to run a Secret Wars. And then same thing with Madam Web's first appearance in Amazing Spider-Man 210. So, guys, let me know your thoughts on those books, and when do you think the time will be to pick up these Madam Web keys? I think, obviously, Amazing Spider-Man 210, solid key. If you can get that in high grade, it's a solid key. It's always going to be worth, in high grade, several $100s. And even in lower grades, it's going to have value because people want that Amazing Spider-Man run. I think Arana's first appearance in Amazing Fantasy 15 is still a pretty good book because when we look, there's not a ton of them out there. And it is an ongoing character. I think Ezekiel Sims, not so much. Julia Carpenter's going to hold on because of the Secret Wars connection. And I think Mattie Franklin is not a character that people are excited about. And that burn run of Amazing Spider-Man is a run that people don't clamor for. It's not a quick seller. The volume 1 of Amazing Spider-Man generally sells. Minor keys sell. Run fillers up to about 300 sell. But that volume 2, those are hard movers. And we'll see as it plays out over time. And I honestly would be very surprised if we see these characters again in the near future on the big screen. My opinion with Sony is they know they can develop a movie, they make some money from the movie, and they can just pick. They have dozens and dozens of characters to choose from. It's going to be Kraven next. Now, Kraven's first appearance is an early Amazing Spider-Man book, and so is the Rhino. So we'll see how that plays out. But they could take, they're talking about El Muerto and Hypno Hustler. They could take any character and just churn something out, which is, I think, what they did with Madam Web. I don't think there was any passion to develop a story around this particular character. And that's something that the MCU, I think, thrived on early on. People wanted to tell stories about the characters. And I think James Gunn was very successful at that with the Guardians of the Galaxy. He wanted to tell stories about those characters. And they weren't characters that everybody knew. I think that's going to play well for us DC fans because, get people who have a passion for the character and want to tell a story about this character. And it's helpful if it connects to the comic books, because there are plenty of people who've read the comic books and have connected to these characters in some meaningful way. Well, enough of that. My little movie review, but let me know what you think about these books. You probably can get one on a really good deal if you're patient and you follow. I mean, target a number. Amazing Fantasy 15, can you get it? Amazing Fantasy 15, Amazing Fantasy 1, First Arana, you can get it for $60 at a 9.8. What are the Raws going to go for? I mean, you know, right now you could probably get a Raw copy for $20. High grade Raw. You know, is it a bad book long term? No. Is it going to take you to the moon? No. So anyway, that's enough for me. Thank you for stopping by. You can take a look at a couple of my other videos here. And this is Jim saying, until next time, enjoy your comics.